Hello, everyone. Before tonight's episode of For What It's Nerd, I just want to give a little bit of context as to how this episode was recorded. This episode was recorded on the 22nd of July, 2022, about a day before the announcements coming out of San Diego Comic-Con regarding the future of the MCU. Thus, some of the stuff that we discuss in here is outdated, especially the stuff regarding the kind of back end of Phase 4. We now know that Phase 4 is going to be ending with Wakanda Forever, where before we had assumed it would end with Fantastic Four. So there is some things in this that are now factually incorrect, essentially. Please bear with that. If you enjoy speculation on Marvel, this is still a great podcast to listen to. It's a great episode to listen to, but there is some factual inequalities now because of the timing of filming versus the timing of the announcements. We will be discussing the new news in the future on the podcast, but for now, please enjoy this episode. Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 2 of For What It's Nerd. We're back again, week 2. I can't believe it. Doesn't feel like 2 minutes ago we got everything set up. Nuts. But we are back. We are going to be doing we're going to be doing it properly this time. We're not going to somehow scuff the void and lose it like an idiot, because that would be unintelligent. But yes, so we are back. Today we are discussing, as you can probably tell by the title, either whether you're watching it after the fact or watching it here on Twitch or listening wherever you may be listening to it. We are discussing the MCU, specifically Phase 4. That kind of deals with kind of everything from early 2020 to now. And I'm very excited because we have a very special guest. We have a very special guest with us today, Andy25brown. Now, Andy is joined by us tonight as a norm. Make of that what you will. We really need to sort these out. These might have to go because these aren't working properly. The rotating, we'll get rid of that one maybe. But yes, Andy, welcome in. Hope you're doing well.
I'm good. How are you?
Yes, I'm doing brilliantly. Thank you very much.
I see you've made me a custom hashtag.
Yes, hashtag make Andy make a YouTube. There you go. I mean, maybe you have and I couldn't find it, but I looked. But no,
but there's nothing on it.
Well, there you go. Andy make a YouTube. That's going to be my running joke, okay, guys? I did it for Megas. I'm doing it for you. Make a YouTube. But yes, so thank you guys for coming in. Thank you guys for being here. We will pretty much, I think, Andy, you really summed it up for us. We've got a few points that we're going to hit tonight. I've kind of summed it up at the top right-hand corner there because I like to kind of keep it concise. But Andy has a few ideas that you want to go through. Andy, do you want to run through those for me? What we've got kind of planned to look at tonight?
Yeah, just kind of a general overview of Phase 4, where it stands. If there is a plan, I don't know. If there is a plan, whatever it is it working? What hasn't worked? What's ahead? Things we'd like to see. And then a couple pitches.
Yes, so like pitches in terms of like what we think, how we think certain movies should go, etc. Right?
Yeah, pretty sure Kevin Feige is going to listen to this. So,
Kevin, if you're listening, hire us. Thank you. I'd much appreciate it. I'm looking for a new job. No, I'm kidding. So, number one, general overview. So, like I said, we're running essentially from the beginning of 2020 to date, right? So we're talking what so far? That's like what 1.5 years of Phase 4. Is that right?
2.5.
Or 2.5.
What movie started Phase 4?
It was WandaVision that started Phase 4 properly. So that was like February 2020, I think, wasn't it?
21.
2021.
I don't know, man.
I'm lost. Basically, from WandaVision to now. That's all we need to know.
Time is fuzzy.
Time is fuzzy. But let's start with WandaVision, right? So WandaVision was a really enterprising show, wasn't it? Like, I think a lot of people were excited about WandaVision. It was very different to anything that had come before it. And I think that's true of most of what's come with Phase 4. Would you agree?
Yeah. Can I use the word balls?
Yeah.
Okay. I think it took a lot of balls for them to make WandaVision because the first couple episodes are not what people were
Yeah,
probably expecting.
they're very out
Like,
there.
even if you read the leading up to release
Yes, yeah.
descriptions and synopsis and whatever else,
Hmm.
the first, I think, 3 episodes were
Yeah.
weird
Well, yeah, because the
compared to
first
what
two,
it was laid out as.
yeah,
But it was worth writing it out, and then
yeah.
it's great.
Well, it's funny
Um,
because I think people looked at WandaVision again. Obviously, I know this is general overview, so we're not going to get too heavily into WandaVision. But people looked at WandaVision as this idea of you can skip the first 2 episodes because they're like meaningless. But really, I think the issue with WandaVision was the end episode. It wasn't the beginning episode; it was the end episode. And I think that's something that the Phase 4 has in general, and that's why I was kind of going with this. Is missing with it sets up everything perfectly, and then the ending or like the next part is the issue. And I think that's what WandaVision suffered from. I think Falcon and the Winter Soldier suffered from that a bit. Loki didn't as much. Loki had a strong ending, I'd say. But I think quite a lot of the others had that kind of situation, right, where they had a moment of like, oh well, it's kind of the story's kind of skewed off. It hasn't quite hit the mark. And I think that Moon Knight, another example, Moon Knight's last episode, whilst technically good, it just didn't hit it perfectly. I think that's something that we're seeing a lot with Phase 4. What do you think?
yeah, and I think one thing, I was talking to somebody at work about this the other day.
Mm-hmm.
If my boss is listening, we totally did work all week long while you're on vacation. Everything was
Oh
cool.
my.
But we were talking about what they've put out so far. I think he is a couple Disney Plus series behind, and
Right. Yeah.
at least I think 1 movie behind.
Right.
But he knows what's going on. And Phase 4 is where they're starting to branch out into the not unknowns, but not mainstream characters like Miss Marvel or Ironheart coming up. Stuff that is intriguing, but like nobody knows. And I think we got spoiled in the first 3 phases because there was, after the first couple movies, I think the 3rd movie was Incredible Hulk, the post-credit scene.
Yeah.
And Tony Stark's in that scene. From there, it was more of a linear path.
Yeah.
And you knew what roughly
it was coming
expect.
because the Avengers was already set up by the end of like the first 3 movies.
Yeah.
And that was all there was at that point as well. So people weren't waiting on tenterhooks, so to speak. But it's funny that you mentioned that actually, because I think that's interesting. I think what Phase 4 also had, Phase 1, sorry, also had was heroes that people already had a shorthand for. If you maybe not Iron Man, he was around, right? He had like animated TV shows and yes, he'd been in things, but really speaking, he was C-list before the MCU, right? But like Captain America, right? I even know this, and I was like not even born by like 30, 40 years. Captain America was like literally like very important as a character, just propaganda wise, right? During like the Second World War and then after, right? So he was ingrained in culture the same way like someone like Superman might be, right? And then Hulk is one of the most popular heroes going. He Spider-Man and kind of like Superman, they're like the big 3, right? Like the ones that everyone knows. If you say, oh, do you know a superhero, someone's probably going to say one of those 3. So like Hulk is in there too. So instantly you've got Iron Man, Hulk, Thor. I mean, Thor also works because the Norse mythology backs him up a lot, right? Like you've got some, like even if you don't know the superhero Thor, you probably heard of the god Thor or something like that, right? Like you've heard of that at some point because I mean, I as a kid was obsessed with. It's different, but like Greek gods, right? Like I thought I was obsessed with the idea of the like Greek culture and Greek gods and Roman gods and all that type of stuff, right? And I think some people will have been the same with Norse gods, right? So again, Thor had this kind of shorthand. Ironheart doesn't have a shorthand, does she? Apart from like she's connected to Iron Man. Miss Marvel doesn't have a shorthand because, frankly, even more so with Miss Marvel, because she doesn't. There's not that history of characters like her being shown on the screen, right? So you have a situation where, like, you have to work harder and you have to pull back on the cameos, pull back on the interconnected story for a bit to set up all these new characters, not only in the MCU, but as a cultural phenomenon as well, right?
Yeah.
And like the thing that I think is the issue here as well is they're working towards X-Men, they're working towards Fantastic Four, which people know, right? Like people are aware of the Fantastic Four, people are aware of the X-Men, but people are so ready for those that they're not taking time to think about the characters that are here right now. I think sometimes that's why people aren't as receptive to stuff like Miss Marvel and stuff. I mean, there's a million different other reasons and maybe stuff we won't go into here, but I think a lot of the reasons are people want the big characters and they don't want to deal with letting smaller characters build up, even though these big characters were once small characters.
Yeah. And I think with the advent of Disney Plus,
yeah,
I probably should have expected Phase 4 would play out this way.
Yeah.
Because one thing that Disney has going for them is Marvel. And they're putting this new product out, and they've got a big backlog or catalog of classic stuff, but how do we get newer people in?
Exactly.
Well, Marvel. Okay.
Yeah.
We can't do a full scale movie, but we can if we break it up in episodes. So like one thing that was at their disposal was the rest of their roster, I guess.
Yeah.
And it made sense to test the waters for the replacement characters in smaller scale, and Disney Plus was great for that. But I still would have thought risk, isn't it? Would have been a more cohesive, like, obvious path.
Yeah, I think I mean that obviously goes into our second point of like what's the plan here, right? And I kind of see where you're coming from. It doesn't look like there's a plan on the surface, right? But I think that's for a reason, because there was a graphic that came out recently that, despite all the, let's discount Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. for a second. Let's talk about the mainline Marvel stuff, right? Phase 1, 2, and 3 combined are smaller than Phase 4. And we're not even done with Phase 4, right? We have She-Hulk yet to come. We have Black Panther still to come. Wakanda Forever, whatever they end up calling it. And then we have Fantastic Four, Ant-Man, and a few other series as well. I forget them off the top of my head, but we have a lot still to come just for Phase 4. Now, that means that by the time Phase 4 is done, it might be twice the size of 1, 2, and 3, right? And that means that what they have to do as a result, because they're dealing with so many characters in so many different realms, you can't have Agatha Harkness show up in the same scene as Sharon Carter or Bucky Barnes. Well, you could, but it wouldn't necessarily make sense or thematic sense, right? And so what they have to do is they're almost building like 3 or 4 storylines at the same time. And obviously, because they're building 3 and 4 stories at the same time, the payoff is separated more fully. And because it's separated more fully, you have an issue where it comes down to like, when do we get the payoff? And I do agree that the payoff for some of these things is taking a little bit too long. But you have to remember, especially with the beginning of Phase 4, we were still in a COVID world. And I think that's very important to remember, because initially, WandaVision would have finished and Doctor Strange would have premiered the next week. Now, obviously, that didn't come to pass, and we can't judge something on what it would have been or could have been or should have been, right? But I think it bears remembering that there was a point where that was the plan, and because COVID happened, certain things did change. So I think there was a plan, but I think they've had to fumble the bag slightly since then, because they've been kind of trying to catch up with themselves, right? Because this isn't just like 3 movies that you can just push back. This is a connected universe that you're suddenly going, fuck, we have to do all these things and change it all around, right?
Yeah. So I'm looking at a graphic
sorry.
of Phase
Yeah.
4,
Uh-huh.
and the dates are all screwed up now because, we should have, according to this, we should have already seen Black Panther 2
Yeah.
earlier this month. But
Yes.
there are 12 movies and 13 series. So
Yeah.
this is basically the existing MCU crammed into, let's see, looks like 2.5 years. They don't have a date. Fantastic Four is the last thing.
Yeah, that ends Phase 4. Yeah, which I love. I love that thematically. By the way, just midway. I know that's a total side point, but I love that thematically. That Fantastic Four ends Phase 4. I love it.
It's just natural. Like it should have.
Yeah.
It's too obvious to not do.
Yeah, it is.
You were talking about, you know, the way. So, sorry, I'm trying to verbalize as to where it makes sense. To me, Phase 4 is individual strands that will eventually intertwine to make like a full rope. You know what I mean?
Yes. Yeah.
But the problem with that is how long are those strings? You know?
Yeah.
Is it going to be worth it? Because some of these later series, like Secret Invasion, there's existing characters coming that don't know much about Ironheart as an MCU character. Armor Wars, I'm not really sure what to expect out of that.
Yeah, no, agreed.
I Am Groot is technically Phase 4, but it's not connected to anything.
It's just like shorts. Yeah.
So like, I don't mind a slow burn if the explosion is worth it.
That's the thing. You know?
Growing up, I read a lot of books. I really don't like Stephen King books.
Right.
Because they're really long. And then the payoff isn't always there for me. It's like, okay, well, I wasted my time.
Why have I read all this? Yeah, I get what you're saying.
And I don't want this to be a Marvel Stephen King movie. You know what I mean?
I get what you're saying. What I think, let's use your analogy, for example. We're building the rope with Phase 4, right? Whereas I feel like with Phase 1, 2, and 3, the rope was already built. If that makes sense. I know that sounds like a very weird thing to say, but I think you already had the trajectory, right? It's that thing of what I was saying before. Iron Man, Captain America, most of those characters were built. I mean, apart from like, you know, Ant-Man, for example, you had to sell people on Ant-Man a little bit, right? You had to sell people on Guardians a bit because people didn't know who the Guardians were. But apart from that, you had a general shorthand for most of those characters. Spider-Man, Black Panther, you had Captain America, even like something like Age of Ultron. Like people know who Ultron is, or did. Like if you're a comic book fan, you knew who Ultron was. You know, so it was that kind of situation where I think a lot of it was shorthanded. But then now you get into like, for example, Eternals. I didn't know much about Eternals. I read comics and I didn't know much about Eternals. Falcon and the Winter Soldier. I didn't know. So the Flag Smashers as a group are brand new. They're a creation for the MCU, but I didn't know about Flag Smasher, the character in the comics. I didn't know about. I knew about Agatha Harkness because I'm obsessed with her for some reason. But I didn't know about like who else. I don't know much about Miss Marvel's villains, for example. Right? Again, someone who's just come around recently, and it's slightly skewed because she has had some changes for the MCU. But again, a lot of new villains, new heroes at once, and people don't like change. And it's not just a sense of diversity in terms of, but it's also a sense of people don't know these characters and thus think they're shit instantly, which is not the case, obviously. But it's what people do, you know?
You mentioned they changed Miss Marvel for the MCU.
Yes.
And I admittedly knew of the character, but didn't know anything about it because I tried getting, so when I was a kid, read comic books when I could. But then as you get older, priorities change in life and everything.
Yes. Yeah.
But then now there's such an onslaught of, it seems
media.
like every 3 or 4 days there's a new issue out, and it's just a lot to keep up with.
Yeah.
So I knew the character existed, but I didn't know much about her actually until Marvel's Avengers, the game came out.
Yeah.
So like in the video game, her more biologic stretching, you know what I mean? It worked in that.
Yes.
But they changed it to be more in the tone of the MCU, and I think that worked.
I didn't like it at first, if I'm honest, but as I looked at it, I came to terms with it, especially after watching the show. I understood it. What I have an issue with Kamala in the MCU is, and I can't sit here and say I've always been a Kamala fan. I have generally been, I like the character, but I'm not sitting here going, I've been a fan since day one. I can't say that. I've never read one of her comics fully. I've read bits and pieces. I've enjoyed the character in games that she's been in, but generally I've not dealt with her that much. But my issue is that I feel like at the point where you change the character's powers, first of all, their superhero origin, because that's been totally changed, and now potentially what the character, this is a slight spoiler, basically anyone who hasn't watched Miss Marvel final episode, shut your ears out now. 2 seconds. She's rumored now to become a mutant, right?
Yeah.
The issue is that in the comic she's an Inhuman, and I personally like the Inhumans. Now I know the Inhumans sure did badly, but I felt like with what they're doing recently, they're starting to kind of invigorate the franchises that kind of died along the way, right? Like whether it's because they cancelled certain contracts, Netflix, for example, or whether or not they thought, oh, this character should come back for this because it makes the most sense for them. That's what they've been doing, right? And so I think that's very important to her character, for me personally, and the fact that it's gone and that she's now simply a mutant, it means that we have less interesting dichotomies within the MCU. And I personally don't like that because it feels like it's dumbing it down, in my opinion.
So let me give you a little bit more optimism, maybe.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So they didn't say she was that.
No. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
A high schooler said,
yes.
"Hey, it looks like there's been a mutation."
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That doesn't rule out the comic accurate.
No, yeah.
Origin. He doesn't know yet.
No, yeah.
So this is a good way to
I
bring
did
both
say
of those groups in.
Yeah, I did say that I was dubious about it when it first started. I feel like what they're doing is, because they know people are waiting for mutants and because they know people are excited about mutants, I feel like they're going to do a bait and switch with Kamala specifically, that she might show up in something related to mutants at some point and then be like, you're not a freaking mutant, or something akin to that, right? But I do think that it's a potential that they could do it that way. I think it could go either way, and I'm not sure if I'd like it if they change it. Now, quickly, we do have a question in chat. I do think it's poignant to discuss, just for people to be cleared up on what the difference between Inhumans and mutants. Jewel Magus has asked, what is the difference between Inhumans and mutants? Now, basic kind of version of it is that mutants are born with a mutation, right? They have something that is genetically different within them, and that creates, either they can manipulate fire, they can manipulate ice, or they have telepathic abilities, etc., and so on. Now, Inhumans can have the same exact abilities, but what they are bioengineered race that have Kree DNA inserted into them, and it activates when they have been subject to pterogenesis, which is a kind of a going into a cocoon. What that means is essentially you've got a situation where an Inhuman could never get their powers if they're not subject to pterogenesis, which is essentially being gassed by Terrigen, which is seen in Marvel's Avengers, for example. That's how the Terrigen is released by the ship, and you see people turn into Inhumans. So that's the idea, right? Now, my issue with this is, and this is why I'm still dubious as to why they've done it, is literally the movie before this. Again, Multiverse of Madness spoilers. So if you don't want that spoiler, just mute for a second or come back in a minute if you're watching live, etc. In that movie, they bring in an Inhuman, and that Inhuman is literally the most prolific Inhuman. And I know it's for a cameo, but it's also the character who showed up in the Inhumans TV show. And thus you see my issue, right? Why are they doing one thing and then not the other? It very much comes back to the idea, is there a plan?
I think there is. It's just, I don't know what it is.
Yeah, I think that's the thing. That's what it comes down to. And I feel like we might get some light on it this weekend. As of recording of this, the 22nd of the 7th, 2022. Obviously, that's a British date, so deal with it, Americans. We have San Diego Comic-Con this weekend, right? This week. And we are thinking that we're going to get some reveals, some ideas about where the MCU is going next. Now, not loads, because I've heard that some of it's going to be coming up at D23, which is later this year. But if we get some light shed on it, it might just be this weekend.
So when is D23?
I'm not sure on the exact date of D23. Let me check. I believe it's in a few months. D23 Expo 2022. It is September 9th. So we're talking what? 2 months?
A little more than a month. I think what they should do is, well, first, do they even have any time blocked off at Comic-Con?
I believe so, yeah.
What they should do is do a tease, which is kind of a dick move, but they should do it to build the hype. Release some details of these movies that are already scheduled. Just like little teasers, but then imply that there is a casting announcement imminent for Fantastic Four.
Yeah. We might even get it. Who knows?
Toy with that, but don't actually like show who it is.
Yeah.
Just show the characters, like their silhouettes or something, and then in the panel, then obviously go head first in their own event. Because I mean, why wouldn't you wait to do it at D23? But like,
yeah, you're going to do it at your own event, obviously.
To tease, but yeah, I forgot this week was Comic-Con week.
Yeah, so it's going to be like, we'll probably see a lot come out this weekend. But yeah, I think it's quite interesting. I think we're kind of stuck between a moment of like, there's a lot of stuff that's clearly going somewhere, but it's not going there yet, which is the issue, right? And like, it's very hard for someone who's very optimistic about the MCU and sees the potential of all these projects to fight against the idea of, well, when is it going to happen type thing, if that makes sense. Like, when is it going to just go bam and like you get like your Avengers or your Thunderbolts or your etc. Yeah, manage expectations. That's a really good. I just called that out of the corner of my eye. What Extra Metrica said in chat. Manage expectations. How do we manage our expectations to where we enjoy what's there right now, but we can still look forward? When you've got a connected universe like this, it's hard, right? Because you're always going to be waiting for the next thing as you're watching the thing in front of you. But it feels like at the moment it's hard to do that fully.
Yeah, and Marvel actively encourages that because we know what the next movies are. So you're watching the movie or the show or whatever, and you're overwatching it in the moment. You're trying to find little things, like in the background of Pixar movies, like they always tease a character from the next movie. Like, I've found myself in a few, like Loki, I had to pause and go back a few scenes because I was thinking, oh, that might be something, and it was just something in the scene. But like, managing expectations is really tough because we already know everything's connected.
Yes,
and if you know what's down the road, like you're jumping to conclusions, and then Yeah.
And then the thing is, what's even worse is when it actually ends up not connecting, and you're like, oh. And I think that's the thing. I think the MCU is
not the way you think it should.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think that's well, I think probably the second. But the MCU has come to a point where, because people expect so much, especially after something like Infinity War and Endgame, right? Events, like true events, like maybe one of the defining moments of a generation in terms of cinema, right? Maybe that's a bit extreme, but I think for some people it will be the case, right? How do you avoid people kind of going, ugh, we're sick now, but it also not just retread ground, right? It's very hard. Yeah. I think that's what the struggle is right now, is making something new that can eventually be better, even potentially. But people aren't willing to wait, and I think that's where a lot of the issues come from right now. And I'm not saying that you're not allowed to dislike something. You are allowed to dislike something. For example, certain people, like Thor: Love and Thunder, for example, just came out, didn't it? And a lot of people didn't like it. I personally don't love it. It's not my favorite Thor movie. I don't hate it either. There's some good parts. There's some really good character work. Natalie Portman did an amazing job. So did Christian Bale for what they were in it. But my issue with it is that there were so many things they could have done better, right? And I think this is where we're at now, where you're always going to be, even the people who are the most forgiving on these shows are the biggest critics now, because they've seen stuff like, I don't know, Captain America Winter Soldier, and say, I love that. Why isn't every movie that? And obviously you don't actually want every movie to be that, but you start getting expectations, right? And then Infinity War, Endgame, you have stuff like Ragnarok, which was very much a big shift in terms of the MCU's tone and kind of movement, right?
Yeah.
And so there's kind of this point where you're getting movies that you might not like. And I personally think that's okay. I think you're allowed to not like some of the MCU, because guess what? It is huge now. It is so big that you are eventually not going to like something. A lot of people didn't end up watching the full part, like the full series of Ms. Marvel, because they weren't gelling with it. That's okay. When your issue with something is based on story or lack of good graphics or something like that, that's fine. There are obviously people who have other issues. There are people better situated than me to discuss those types of things, but don't watch. And I say that in a very realistic way. I don't mean it in terms of fuck you, don't watch it, you're not a fan, because I disagree with that whole sentiment. If you dislike something and you are disliking the way the MCU is going, and this is me talking to everyone, people in chat, here on Twitch, people who are listening at home, people who are, seeing this on TikTok, if you don't like where the MCU is going, if you don't like a specific project, don't go back and watch it another 6 times in the cinema just because you do that usually. Don't go and rewatch it. Don't watch it on Disney Plus. Cancel your Disney Plus subscription for a month until the show ends, if that's all you watch on there, or something like that. You do not need to consume the MCU if you do not like it. And if you don't like it, stop trying to make it so that you do like it, because for every person who dislikes a project, there will also be someone who loves it. I loved Multiverse of Madness. Many people thought it was shit. That's the top and bottom of it. And it will always be the case. And it's always been the case. You guys might like Iron Man. I think they're pretty boring movies. Iron Man 1's pretty good, but 2 and 3 are shit in my opinion. Yeah, I love Dark World. I love Dark World. Now, Andy, you'll probably say to me, you hate Dark World, right?
Yeah, it's the only thing saving Love and Thunder from being the worst Thor movie.
I personally think Dark World is one of the better ones. I would rank my Thor movies: Ragnarok, Dark World, Thor, Love and Thunder, Thor. I think Thor is the worst one, the first Thor. But people would disagree with that, and that's fine. That's fine with me. But I just feel like people aren't willing to accept that there will be different things for different people, and that you can't like everything. It's the same with Star Wars, and I'm not going to go into, again, that's a whole other topic for a whole other time. But there is stuff that you will not like because these universes are so expansive, and they're trying to cover different genres, tones, mediums, ways of telling story, TV versus film versus animation versus live action. They're doing a million different things now. If you don't like something, stop watching. It's as simple as that. You vote with your money every single time. If they realize that their venture is failing because they've made some wrong turns, the best way to put someone back on track is to say, hey, we're not buying it. But if you keep consuming, it's your own fault, quite frankly. I say that in the nicest possible way, the most non-inflammatory way. But if you dislike something, stop watching. It's as simple as that.
Yeah, I think it's almost too simple of a concept, though. And people don't even consider it. Yeah, because I mean, that can be a whole different rabbit hole to fall down. Yeah. But so I don't like Dark World because I didn't like the movie.
That's fine.
but it's necessary for the evolution of the character.
Yes.
For one,
Uh-huh.
looking back at it, doesn't match the same quality as the newer ones.
Yeah.
But you have to have that because you have to
set him up. Yeah.
You have to have the character arc start somewhere.
Yeah.
And you have to have Thor be an asshole. Like when he's just cocky and arrogant.
Yeah.
For him to get to where, without spoiling anything, the very last part of his fourth movie.
Yeah, exactly. 100% do agree with that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, yeah, but I think people don't realize that there are always going to be bad movies and good movies within, a year or within a month or within, you're even with like, it's impossible for every movie to be good, right? It's impossible.
Yeah,
it's
statistically impossible for them to all be bangers.
Yeah, exactly. Because
it can't.
Because you will instantly say, well, that wasn't as good as that one, thus that one's worse. Like, that's just how that works. So we can't sit here all the time and say that, like, people on Twitter and stuff, and obviously Twitter is a cesspit anyway. But love you people on Twitter. People will say that was dog shit. I hated it. Look at this, like, really bad graphics on this or whatever, right? And it's like, okay, but also you can go onto Twitter and see the exact same response about the film that someone else loved, right? Like, it's always going to work that way. And so I think it's about just making it I mean, obviously it's funny because we're sitting here reviewing the MCU, but really it is all down to personal choice at the end of the day, isn't it? We can sit here and say this is great all day. We could try and convince people it's great, and yeah, well, if we do that, we do that. But if you don't like something, you don't like it, and I'm not going to sit here and tell you how you should like it. I'm just going to tell you, sit here and think about why you're so avidly against certain things, rather than just saying, hey, I just like it and move on. That's what I'm questioning. That's what I question with these people.
I don't want to. This is MCU related, and I don't want to stray.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
But I know they're making a What If Volume 2 or Season 2, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
I had seen something that it may release as early as this year.
Yeah.
But then I didn't see anything else about it. Is that still a possibility?
As far as I'm aware, the suggestion was yes, but I don't know when. Again, it might be released this weekend, some information on it. But I'm not aware of when exactly. I think more likely very much the end of this year or the beginning of next at this point. I feel like if it was going to be coming out shortly, we'd know about it by now. But it is an animated show, so it might not have as much spotlight on it as other things, so you never know.
I think there was, 9 episodes of that series so far?
Yes. Yeah.
I will never watch half of those again because I didn't care for them.
Yeah.
I understand why they were there, what the purpose was, whatever. But just like, I'm kind of bouncing around here. Sorry, I'm still looking at this graphic of the Phase 4. I think the best way to unify the Phase 4 threads into what we're used to is, and I never thought I would have said this, Loki Season 2.
Yeah. I agree, actually. Yeah.
There's a lot there that can work. And the reason why I say I never thought I would say that is because in several ways, Loki has been the Joker of the MCU.
Yeah.
Overdone, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, he's been in probably the most movies villain-wise, yeah.
And the reason why I think he's overdone is because he's always the same thing. The Joker likes to sow seeds of chaos just for the sake of being chaotic. Loki will act like he's on whatever side, and then, nope, gotcha. Like, okay, well, where's the twist?
Yes, I get what you're saying.
They fixed that, I think, with the series. But I think the possibilities with the TVA, the variants and stuff,
leave the most open for solving the kind of issues that are arising with the MCU, so to speak. Yeah, I agree. I think if you look at most of the properties, the ones that don't fit with that obviously is the Eternals. The Eternals are doing their own thing. Falcon and the Winter Soldier, um, and Spider-Man now after No Way Home, right? But otherwise, you've got most of the characters who can fit into that storyline easily. We all know that Scarlet Witch is not gone and forgotten. Let's put it that way. We know Agatha Harkness is coming around. She could easily be linked to it. We've got Doctor Strange still. We've got other kind of supernatural people coming up. I mean, there's meant to be like a Halloween special this year, which we still know basically nothing about. Like, you know what I mean? So it's like we're in a situation where there's a lot of multiversal stuff going on. And I do agree. I think Loki can Ant-Man as well. Obviously, is going to be linked because it's going to have Jonathan Majors in it. That is his name. I hope I got it right. As Kang, right? So which is a connection. Yeah, which right. I think it is. Which is a connection, obviously, to Loki. So that can feed back in. So there's stuff that's going on that could really set Loki season 2 to be, or if season 2 comes before Ant-Man, to set Ant-Man up, for example, right? Or to lead into Ant-Man. Now, obviously, I don't think Loki's just going to show up in Ant-Man, but I feel like we really need to get to a point where we start to understand what threat we have going forward, or what kind of threats, because it's going to be a few. Let's be real. But yeah, I think it's a weird one because I think there's a lot of stuff going on, and you can't dilute it into one plot line, unlike Avengers.
Like I said, I hope this isn't a visual Stephen King novel. Like,
yeah, that it doesn't come out shit, essentially.
Yeah,
for want of a better term.
Oh, it was a big spider the whole time. No,
yeah. But yeah, so we've kind of slightly covered it with what we've been talking about, what to look forward to. So I'll ask you this question, Andy. What is your most anticipated project that we know of?
Fantastic Four, but I don't want to count that.
Right, okay. What's your one alternatively to Fantastic Four?
Whatever the 4th Captain America movie is going to be called.
Right, yes, that's because that sounds quite interesting. I don't know whether you've heard the rumors about this. Again, these are all rumors and very much up in the air, but the idea would be the villain would be I forget her superhero name, supervillain name, should I say, but it would be Red Skull's daughter. Now, I'd be quite interesting to see a resurgent Hydra, because Hydra I felt was used far too quickly. Like for Hydra being, I mean, if you think of like Marvel, one of the big villain groups I think of is Hydra, right? And they were used really quickly and then kind of done with, right? And I think seeing them come back, but under a different leadership in a different kind of way, because I think it would be like the Serpent Society, I think it's called when she's running them, would be really interesting and a really cool way of giving Sam a similar kind of villain to face to Cap. Sorry, Cap to, you know what I mean? I'm going to say Sam and Cap still. That is not a slight on Sam. It's just, it's easier to reference them that way to me. Give Sam a very similar enemy to Cap and see how he deals with that, right? Because he dealt with parts of Hydra when he was Falcon, right? In Falcon the Winter Soldier, not Falcon the Winter Soldier, sorry, Winter Soldier. But didn't really deal with them as a faction. He was just kind of there, right? So it'd be really interesting to see that. I also think Captain America 4 will see more Avengers themes return. In the comics, Sam ends up running the Avengers. He ends up being the leader of them at one point. And I think that'd be a really good way of starting to move towards that, right? You know, because a lot of people were going about, Captain America 4 will be him earning his place as Captain America. He's already done that. We know that was the whole point of Falcon the Winter Soldier. He's done that. He did that even before then, but regardless, he's done it enough times. But what if it's about him learning to become the leader of the Avengers that the world needs right now, and then that, bam, you're straight back into the Avengers, right? He starts building his team. That'll be a really cool way of doing it, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's what the Captain America 4 has the potential to do. So I'm kind of hyped for Captain America 4 in the very much the same way as you are, actually.
Yeah, I think with one thing they didn't really capitalize on, and I cannot think of the character's name. The
Describe
grandson.
them.
It's Elijah's grandson.
Oh yes, Isaiah.
Yeah, yeah. Um,
Yeah.
what's his name in the comics?
Oh, Patriot.
Yeah, Patriot.
Mm-hmm.
So they've already planted that seed,
Yes.
but I think Captain America 4 would be a good launching point for
Yeah.
Young Avengers.
Yes, that could be another way of doing it. Have him be the mentor figure for Young Avengers. Have kind of Isaiah show up in there as part, like almost like have him be Sam's Bucky for that movie, if that makes sense. Like have him be the kind of the sidekick character, and then move off to be, and Sam's kind of overseeing them or something akin to that. That'd be a really cool way of doing it.
Yeah, and I think they will do themselves a disservice if they do the thing where all of a sudden, oh no, he's going to go back to being the Falcon. No, leave him as Captain America.
Yes.
There's another character they introduced in that series that would be great to see on screen, and that's the. I should have looked at the names before I started talking about this,
It's
but
okay.
the soldier that gets the Falcon wings.
Oh yes. Joaquin Torres, I think it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, he becomes Falcon. Yeah.
Yeah. I think when you do that, I don't know. I think that's gonna be the best one. That's the one I'm looking forward to, excluding Fantastic Four.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I'll get back to why I'll get back to Fantastic Four a little bit later down the list.
Yeah. The one that I'm actually most excited for, it probably comes as no surprise, again, apart from Fantastic Four, because Fantastic Four is something I talk about all the time, is Agatha House of Harkness, right? Now, again, maybe no surprise, but I think it's going to be very interesting because I think House of Harkness might do what we all expected WandaVision to do. Now, for those who don't know, in the comics, Agatha has a son. He is called Nicholas Scratch, and I believe at one point he works for Mephisto. Now, I might be wrong about that, but I could see the story of House of Harkness essentially dealing with Agatha. I assume it's going to be like somewhere in the past for some of it, dealing with Agatha and kind of more darker forces, right? Which again leads into potentially a Scarlet Witch movie if they ever do that, or anything akin to that, right? And I think Agatha as a character and Agatha's show has the most kind of potential because of that, because Agatha's like centuries old. There's so much time that Agatha has been around for, and it can literally take place across all of that, or some of that, or none of that. And I think, you know, we've had parts that have suggested the backstory of the world before, but nothing eldritch. And I think Agatha has the potential to do that. And with that, you then have the potential to bring in characters like Morgan Le Fay, which is linked to like Merlin, which is linked to Captain Britain. And then you've got like characters like it's coming to me. Give me 2 seconds. It's coming. It's coming. Not Howard the Duck. It's gone. But there's like a lot of witches and warlocks and stuff like that that don't necessarily get linked to Doctor Strange that can be brought in through Agatha.
Sandwich.
What are you doing this for?
What
are you doing this for?
I'm kind of pun at some point.
Asshat.
I've made it almost 57 and a half minutes.
Yeah, okay, so fair enough.
Giving my blue ribbon for new personal best.
Fuck's sake. But there's many Ghost Rider. You could bring in Ghost Rider. You could do you could reintroduce Nico Minoru. You can deal with for example Lilith, who is a big character. She's going to be in Midnight Suns, the game that's coming out later this year, but you could do that. You know, you have a lot of characters who are linked to kind of darker magics. You know, all the vampire stuff to deal with Dracula and Blade, and those characters are coming forward. Black Knight, those characters are coming forward over time. And I think Agatha has the potential to bring a new kind of lens to the MCU that we haven't really got, because even WandaVision didn't go all the way with it. So that's what I'm excited for personally.
You think House of Harkness will be scary?
I think it could be similar to Multiverse of Madness. Let's put it that way. I don't think it would be like
I think they
scary.
need something, not like piss
Not
your
make you
pants.
shit yourself. Yeah,
scared,
not make you shit
but
yourself, but like
something like just
a little bit
something
more
of a different tone.
cerebral. Yeah.
Yeah.
We do have a question here, by the way, from It's Not Anna. Thank you for being here, Anna. Do you think they'll go back in time a bit in the future of the MCU? For example, we have the Black Widow movie, which goes a bit back a bit. It provides grounds for nostalgia with all the characters that are wrapped up now, while also moving forward with new projects. That's a very good one to ask, I think. I think, funnily enough, the one we're just talking about, Agatha, could potentially do that a little bit. But I think for the most part, they're kind of at a point where they're looking mainly forward. Now, does that mean that we might have scenes? We might not have a scene in, I don't know, Captain America 4 where, you know, you see a moment between Cap and Sam, or between Sam and another Avenger or something, right? That might be situated in the past. Could happen, right? It could very easily happen. WandaVision recontextualized a lot of the lead up to Age of Ultron in regard to Wanda, right? So it doesn't mean that won't happen. I think it's just that it depends on how they go with the certain projects. It depends on what they try and do. For example, Ironheart. Now, this isn't really so much a spoiler because Ironheart isn't in the MCU yet, but Ironheart has the potential to kind of do this slightly because she is she's a kind of prodigy, but she becomes such because she is inspired by Tony Stark. Now, I'm not saying that is 100% certain to happen. It might simply be a small thing, a small reference. I doubt it personally, but it might be. But at the same time, it could very much be that she met him at some point and you have a flashback scene of that, for example. But no, I don't think you'll ever get something again, at least for a while, that is set fully within the past, unless you're talking about maybe the Fantastic Four movie might be set in the past, but that's not with old characters, if that makes sense. Well, it could be. It depends, I suppose.
My question is, when you say a bit, go back in time a bit, what do you define a bit as?
Well, I don't mean to speak for Anna here, but I think what Anna means is potentially something, let's say, kind of
like an entire
around the time of Avengers,
or entire series set in the past, or just like callbacks.
I think from what the question contextualized, it provides a ground for nostalgia with all the characters that are wrapped up, and especially because she was saying about Black Widow, I'd say probably something that is fully set in a past situation, so to speak.
Some of the characters that they now have at their disposal, they're going to have to.
You mean X-Men? Is that what you mean?
Yeah. So
yeah.
Obviously there's I guess alpha mutant or whatever. Apocalypse. Like he was Alvin Sur was the first, right?
Yeah. And yeah.
So that character has to be introduced somehow. They got to make it make sense. Whatever.
Yeah.
I don't know the best way to do that. If it's the first act of a movie that launches the X-Men, I don't know. But I think you've got to do that. But also, the Fantastic Four has to be set in the past.
At least to a degree. At least like the first act, like you say, at least the first act.
Yeah.
Because you have to have... Because you're not telling me that Reed Richards, one of the smartest men alive, was just totally absent from all these situations regarding S.H.I.E.L.D. and all this type of stuff from start to finish, like
unavailable
in some way. Yeah.
Or else the whole cinematic universe collapses.
Yeah. So either they're doing a younger version, it's brand new, like right on this cusp, right? And they're relatively young. But I don't think that. I think the likelihood is what happened is they were transformed, but they were kind of stuck somewhere or caught somewhere for a certain amount of time. And that's why
you have read my mind for the second to last point that we were going to talk about.
We're trying to move on to it now then?
No, you can finish your thought. It's just that you're kind of circling what I was.
Well, I'll finish what I was just about to say, and then we can move on to that. Yeah. My kind of thing, and I think this would be the perfect way of doing exactly what Anna said, paying homage to something, but equally making something very new. And that would be a Wolverine Disney Plus show. Now, Wolverine has had enough movies, in my opinion. He's had a lot of them. Even the X-Men movies were Wolverine movies, really. So he's had like 6 or 7 movies made around him, right? Make a Wolverine Disney Plus show. Yeah, but you know what I mean. Make a Disney Plus Wolverine show and set it in the past, right? Doesn't have to be like the last episode can kind of bring him towards his introduction to the X-Men, etc., right? But set them during the past. And one of those episodes can be when Wolverine fought in World War II. Now, who was around in World War II?
Peggy Carter.
Well, I wasn't really going for Peggy Carter. I was going for
Tommy Lee Jones.
I was going for Captain America, but
I've heard of him.
But like, can you imagine that? Like, can you imagine? I mean, Peggy Carter would be interesting to see come back in that way as well, right? But it would be very interesting if we had an episode of a Wolverine TV show where you get to see Captain America and Wolverine interact, because that has happened in the comics, that they were around at the same time, and so that would be a really good way of kind of like, it legitimizes Wolverine within the MCU, but at the same time gives us something that's new and fresh for an old character as well, right?
And that's another character I think that you have to dive into the past somehow. Maybe do it better than X-Men Origins Wolverine or whatever the title order was. Like, that movie is crap. Like, I will die on that hill.
Most of the X-Men movies have a bit of an issue with them, but yeah.
Would it be cheesy to have Wolverine sitting in the audience of a USO show that Captain America is on stage doing? Like, would that be cheesy? You know what I mean? Like, because sometimes
I suppose, when
things are like that, it feels forced.
In a sense, yes, but if you think about it this way, Wolverine was very much involved with higher stakes military missions. I mean, you see that in X-Men Origins Wolverine, right? You see that, and he obviously it's set a little bit later in that version, but he did that during the World War II as well. Like, that was part of it. Like, that's a thing in the comics. It's happened, and so I don't see why you wouldn't have a situation where, if there was a joint operation between, I don't know, like a few different places, and they needed their best people on it, why you wouldn't have someone like Wolverine and someone like Captain America cross paths. Now, is it slightly forced? Yes, but the thing is, it's like any movie, right? People will go, oh, well, of course that happened because the plot needed to continue. And you're like, yes, of course it did. There's certain things that are going to happen by plot contrivance, regardless of how much you explain it or make it make sense, right? So you might as well have fun with it at that point. And I think that one would be something that people would genuinely love anyway. Wolverine and Captain America are two well-liked characters, and seeing those two occupy the same, and especially because there's something to learn there as well, right? Cap is one way about things, and Wolverine is very much the other way, right? Wolverine stab first, ask questions later. Cap is slightly different than that. And so there's something to learn there about how those characters and those kind of moralities mix, right? So I don't think it would be necessarily just cheese. I think it depends on how you do it.
That would work, but with the caveat that he's Logan all the way up until the last 3 minutes of the last episode, and the last thing you see is him being lowered into the tank with all the wires and leads on him. Don't show him as Wolverine yet.
That'd be a good way of doing it, as kind of having it like essentially it'll be, you would fully pad out the first part of his life, and then you would deal with the kind of repercussions of him becoming Weapon X in like a movie or in like season 2 or something like that, right?
Yeah.
And but the thing is with that as well, and this is the interesting thing, you can do that and still put him in an X-Men movie if you're making an X-Men movie at the same time, because we all know how Wolverine ends up there eventually anyway. The implication is there from past experience, right? So you can still, and people be like, whoa, why is he there? For people who are new, so that it's like an interesting moment for new people. But like at the same time, you get to still play with a series set in the past, and I think that's it would be, for want of a better word, it'd be like the new Agent Carter, in that you're dealing with a past series that's coming out brand new, whilst that character is also appearing in newer stuff, right? And so, like, I think that would be the best way of kind of doing a Wolverine this time around. But I mean, depending on whether it happens or not, it's a different story. Speaking of that, though, you did say you wanted to speak about a potential pitch for a Fantastic Four movie. So if you want to go ahead, feel free.
So if Reed Richards is incredibly smart, he's going to be ahead of the game on stuff.
Yeah.
I think they have to not disappear in space.
Yes.
I think they need to do their time in exile in the quantum realm.
Right.
The only downside to that is you would need to have Hank Pym be aware of them.
Yeah.
And Hank Pym's been in enough movies already that he hasn't mentioned Reed Richards. Yeah. A brilliant mind who's been missing since the 60s or the 70s, which is when that has to start.
Well, I do have a solution. I do have a slight solution to your problem. I'd heard something sort of similarish before, and there is a thing called the negative zone. Now, it was first introduced in Fantastic Four 51 in 1966. But it is essentially an antimatter continuum that exists alongside the continuum Earth occupies. Now, the interesting thing about that is that the negative zone's time moves differently to ours. I don't remember exactly how, but like it can be years, and it can be only like weeks for someone else. So you could essentially. Kind of, yeah. So you could essentially have someone go in at the end of like a 30-year, like at the beginning of a 30-year gap, and then come out of it and still be the same age, essentially, after those 30 years. So if that was where they went, I mean, the thing is as well, luckily, it's linked to the Fantastic Four. So it's a perfect way of doing it, really. It's just whether or not how they set that up to happen at the end of the movie, whether it's intentional or whether it's what's the word? Like you say, whether they're trapped by accident. Because I feel like trapped by accident is kind of, like you say, done. I'd rather if they almost go into the negative zone intentionally because they're explorers. Because the thing is with the Fantastic Four, yes, they are superheroes, but they're explorers and adventurers and scientists first. And I think that'll be a really good way of doing it, right? Like saying, hey, we're doing it because of this.
I'm changing my movie pitch halfway through.
It's fine.
Because I didn't know about the negative zone.
Well, that's what we're here for.
Because that opens the door for other things rather than rehashing the quantum realm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like even in their cartoon, they had access to top-notch equipment.
Yeah.
You know, through robotics and all this stuff.
Yes.
But they can't have always had access to that.
No, exactly.
What if Reed Richards stumbles across through research and he can be like a wingnut type character where Hank Pym is familiar with him and Howard Stark knows who he is, but nobody gives him any respect.
They discount him.
He's rambling on about something that doesn't exist, but it does. Yeah. But he doesn't have credibility, blah, blah. So that's why he goes in there intentionally with the other three characters.
Yeah.
But since he doesn't have funding and stuff, he has to make the stuff himself. And while he is smart, maybe he messes something up. He overlooks a step and accidentally sabotages them to where they get stuck in the negative zone for a while. Yeah. And since he was a wingnut type character where nobody really paid him much attention or respect, that's how you can quantify him as
not showing up in all these
in existence, and have him be the same age as sometimes when he's been on screen recently this year. And have it make sense. Like, I don't know. There's a lot of potential.
I think the Fantastic Four movie is the movie that has the most ways to potentially go about it. I mean, it depends entirely on who the villain is as well, right? Because we have no idea who the villain is.
For that was to not bring Doctor Doom in yet.
I agree. Yeah.
There needs to not be a conventional villain in the Fantastic Four.
Yeah.
The villain has to be whatever thing they're stuck in.
Yes, some kind of like, it has to be a
survival movie.
Yeah. I think that would be actually really fun and very different. But I agree. I agree. Doom needs to be not left, but teased and kind of slowly eked out, because he's such a monumental part of Marvel. You can't do him in one movie. You can't. It's impossible. I will quickly, whilst we're here. Game Time with Anthony asked a really interesting question. Canonically, there are a lot of smart characters: Reed Richards, Tony Stark, Bruce Banner, and Hank Pym, to list just a few. Do we have a canonical answer as to whom is top dog? If not, who do we all think is the smartest of Smarty Pants? So, there's a million different ways to answer this question. First off, is that in the MCU, pretty much it's Tony Stark. That's just done. But most interestingly, in the comics, is that it was Reed Richards for a long time, Then he was superseded by Moon Girl. Now, if you don't know Moon Girl, I suggest you look her up. She is a child prodigy. Smarter than
dinosaurs, isn't she?
Yes, she has Devil Dinosaur. Yeah, I was just about to get there. Yeah, she has a T-Rex as a companion, which is just fantastic, really. It's so brilliant because it just undercuts anyone who's like, oh my gosh, like Reed Richards is the smartest. No, she is. I'm sorry. Reed Richards even acknowledges it at some point, I think. And yeah, so Moon Girl in the comics is the smartest person alive, or at least human alive. I don't remember the exact details. But she is the smartest character in Marvel. And she has a dinosaur, a T-Rex, as a companion. So there you go. There's a little bit of a tidbit, a little bit of Marvel knowledge for you. We are kind of deviating slightly from the MCU here. You were saying also, and I assume you have a mystery character similar to how we just dealt with some mysterious characters that people might not be aware of. You said you have a mystery surprise series pitch. Do you want to tell me about that?
Two. One of them I won't go into too much detail just because I don't know too much about the character overall, but I think
we can discuss
Plus series could help build the character out without being in the Fantastic Four reboot.
Right.
And that's
yes.
new.
Yes. Yeah.
You need to not ruin the character like in the most recent reboot attempt. Like that was terrible.
Yeah. Oh, that was Fan 4 Stick 4.
Yeah.
Fan 4 Stick or whatever it was.
Yeah. And then you also mentioned that Doom, he needs to be the next Thanos.
Yes.
Where there's a big build up to whatever you want to call the event, Avengers, or make up a different name or whatever. But you got to start somewhere. So develop that character. And Disney Plus series, they're episode based. So you build interest that way, because you can't binge them all at once, but like seize the opportunity, flesh that character out fully before he steps foot in the movie.
Well,
and I don't know the best way to do that because I don't know much about him other than that he is a very lucrative character for the MCU to have now.
Yeah. Well, so I don't know loads about Doom myself. I haven't read loads and loads about him. I'm not the best person to talk about this, but I do follow some people on TikTok who are big Doom enthusiasts, and one of them pointed to me towards a perfect way of doing a Doom series, and it's called Fantastic Four Books of Doom. I'll just read the blurb for you guys. You'll see why it'll work as a series. From the black steppes of Eastern Europe to the college campuses of New York City, and finally to the throne of Latveria, this is the life of Von Doom. From his earliest disasters to his scientific triumphs to the tragedy of the fractured man he will become, this is the story you know and the one you don't. The story of the missing years and the journey that shaped the man who will be king. An epic Russian tragedy in comic form, this is unlike any Doom story you've ever seen. 5-time Eisner-nominated Best Writer Ed Brubaker turns his shadowy vision to Marvel's greatest villain, Victor Von Doom. With the phenomenal art of Pablo Raimondi, you'll witness Doom's life from his earliest moments to the day he took the throne of Latveria. A dark and revealing examination of how an innocent boy grows up to be a tyrant, a new twist on an old legend. Books of Doom is a sweeping epic of tragedy, madness, and destiny. And this is even more interesting, collecting Books of Doom 1 to 6. Now, as we know, every single Disney Plus series, apart from WandaVision and I think She-Hulk, but they are formatted differently, there's been 6 episodes. You could literally... 9, yeah.
That's a one-off thing.
Yeah, exactly. But you could essentially use this comic book, not panel for panel, so to speak, but issue for issue, as a way of marketing Doom's life. And I think that would be a really good way of doing it. Again, that's not my idea. Someone has said that before me. I am regurgitating it, but I do think it's worth mentioning. And I think it'd be a really good way of dealing with Doom. But also, if you do that at the right point, you get a sympathetic angle of Doom as well, right? You get the understanding of Doom. I think that's something that we missed slightly with Thanos, because we only got a few establishing scenes of why Thanos was doing what he was doing. And whilst obviously we don't necessarily always want to sympathize with our villains, I think Thanos could have done with a little bit more of that nearer the end, before Infinity War / Endgame. And if we had Disney Plus then, that would have been the perfect place to do it, right?
Yeah, and I slightly disagree with, you know, we don't need to sympathize with the villain, or however you phrase that.
Yeah.
I think you need to.
Yeah.
Just to build the character out.
Yeah.
But I get tired of the trope of former villain and is now a superhero or ally or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah, like the Nebula Loki effect, so to speak.
Yeah.
Yeah. I get it.
And some of it, like, you can't avoid, like Charles Xavier and Eric Leshner are close, and even when they're butting heads on a lot of the runs that X-Men has had, ultimately, and they showed it in Days of Future Past, they're close again. I don't want that.
Yeah,
I want to feel sympathetic toward him to understand why he's doing it, and I want him to go full tilt. No redemption.
Yeah,
something different. And I think one thing, and I don't want to deviate too much because I know I'm running out of time and stuff, but
no, it's fine.
There has to be a lot of thought put into how Magneto is introduced.
Oh yeah, I mean, that's a hard one.
Yes. For all of the X-Men to work.
Yes.
There is one very dark, very important chapter in real history.
Yeah.
That has to happen.
Sets it all up, yeah.
That's the Holocaust. Because he models the rest of his run. Like there's
his Brotherhood is based on the idea of not allowing that to happen again to people like him.
The problem is when was that?
Yeah, exactly. And it's like by the time of the MCU, you're talking what? Fucking.
It'll be close to 100 years.
Yeah, like
on screen, really quick. Yeah,
on screen 100 years, and like, yes, he was a child then, but already you're talking about a Magneto who's 110. Yeah, it doesn't work the same way as it did in the comics, or even with the X-Men movies back in the early 2000s. It doesn't work the same anymore. So you have to think of a way to allow that to happen that doesn't like... So essentially you have to have the first few X-Men films either be based in the past or think of some way to deal with the Magneto situation, right?
Yeah, or kind of retcon some of his abilities.
Yeah, make him basically
Where he,
long-lived as well.
yeah, where he ages really slow because
Yeah,
there's iron in blood and you need blood to survive, so maybe he can whatever. I don't know, it'll
something
be
something
cheesy if it's
crazy.
not done right.
Yeah, no, I know what you mean.
But so the second series pitch, and I think may have talked to you about this before.
Mm-hmm.
There's one character that has only shown up in two Marvel movies or series
Right.
collectively that needs to be heavily relied upon to make certain things work. And that is FBI agent James Woo. It needs to be the M Files.
Yes, I get what you're saying. Yeah,
He's
essentially,
the fringe investigator.
Yeah.
He helped flesh out mutants.
Mm-hmm.
You can kind of make it like a mutant of the week type thing where it's kind of lighthearted, kind of, but it also has to help fill in the blanks on some of the stuff.
Yeah, no, I get what you're saying. And that could work.
I really want to watch that because that character, like as soon as he shows up in Ant-Man 2 or Ant-Man and the Wasp,
yes, yeah.
Like there's something about that character, like, you know what?
We like you type thing. Yeah.
But it's also necessary. Like,
yeah, I agree.
I really like that character, and I think they need to do something with him, especially after WandaVision. Like,
yeah,
I feel
exactly.
like he earned more screen time,
and now he earns even more.
Yeah, and I feel bad because I can't think of the actor's name right now, but that guy's good.
Yeah.
And
I can't either. I feel really bad, but I can't remember every name.
Yeah,
I've remembered enough already.
There's way too many Marvel actors.
Yeah.
But he's really good at that character, and I think that character can bridge a lot of gaps
if you want him to. Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
and there's a lot of mutants that are interesting that don't necessarily fit the mold.
Couldn't do a full show or couldn't do a full movie. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of them. A lot. Mutants are probably the biggest category of Marvel superheroes. I think there's a million different routes you can go down with the X-Men. I think you're going to have to just pick one and go with it anyway. So why not do something fun with it? Obviously, we'll see what they actually shake out. But I think why not? I think
it'll allow for some callbacks to some really popular characters. One of which is barely in Thor 4. And then the other is a big part of WandaVision. But I think Jimmy Woo can collaborate with them and even some
you could potentially bring back some Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. characters to work alongside as well. Because those characters are readily available. And you could easily do that. They have very similar. I mean, that was what Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. was in the beginning. Not so much mutants, obviously, but it was the kind of problem of the week type thing. So if you want to do something similar with Jimmy Woo, you could bring some characters back from Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. to kind of almost be like, yeah, we've done this before, type thing.
You can even include Inhumans in that.
Yes.
Because
they've kind of been through it before. I think there's a lot of potential for many things, but I mean, most of these ideas won't come to fruition. I mean, everyone on TikTok is, or any sort of social media, is throwing out ideas every fucking minute. One of them's going to stick, but most of them won't, and that's fine. But I think it's just kind of, it's the expectation thing that we've been saying since the beginning. Some people expect certain things and don't get them, whereas us here, we're talking about them. We're saying, I'd like this. If it doesn't happen, it's not the end of the world, though. You know, I think that's the difference. Well, Andy, I think we've had a good run. We're very happy with the discussion we've had. We've had a lot of good conversation points, I'd say. No real sticking points as well, which is always good. I really appreciate you coming by, Andy. I really appreciate you hanging out. Thank you for dedicating 2 hours of your time to this. Guys, thank you in chat as well. And for those listening on YouTube / watching on YouTube and on Apple, Spotify and elsewhere, I am gonna end it there. So thanks, guys, and I'll see you in the next one.